At 6:02 local time, the lead F-35I was already 90 minutes inside Iran, deep enough that the only way out was straight through. 6 stealth jets, radars cold, 1 clean line to Parchin. Then the cockpit warning tone changed. X-band fire control energy. A Tor M1 had just snapped awake, cold a minute ago, invisible a second ago, and now it was locked on like it had been waiting in the dark for the exact moment he crossed the threshold. 38 kilometers, closing. He watched the range count tick down and ran the math he'd hoped he wouldn't need tonight. The Tor's 9 M331 can cover 12 kilometers in about 15 seconds, pulling 28 Gs at the end, roughly 3 times what his jet can sustain in a hard defensive turn. His JDAM release needed him inside 15 kilometers. That left 3 kilometers between weapon off the jet and inside the Tor's kill zone. At roughly 9 miles a minute, that was about 20 seconds of breathing room, and he was burning through it fast. And the trap had a second layer. If the Tor forced him low to survive the lock, the air around Parchin wasn't just radar and missiles. It was Missile-2 man-pads waiting underneath. So this wasn't about making it to the target. It was about surviving the one moment stealth pilots dread most, the bay doors opening, without giving the Tor a clean look, and without dropping low enough for a shoulder-fired shot to finish the job. Inside the Tor vehicle, the IRGC operator tracked the contacts drifting toward the complex. He'd spent 7 days watching harms gut anything that radiated too long. Every long-range SAM that lit up got wiped out. His Tor survived because he never gave them a beam to ride. At short range, that's the advantage. By the time they realize you're shooting, the timeline is already against them. And at 12 kilometers, a harm can't even reach him before his missile reaches its target. 3 minutes earlier, Iran's Gadir VHF early warning network fed him bearing data, contacts inbound from the southwest. So he armed the first 9 M331 and watched the range fall. 32 kilometers, dropping fast. Then 25. In the cockpit, the pilot threw the Adirs electronic warfare suite at the problem, trying to smear the fire control picture. Against the fixed-frequency radar, you can sometimes drown the beam. The Tor didn't give him that. It hopped frequencies every pulse, forcing the jammer to spread power thin across too many channels at once. Less power per channel meant the Tor still got a usable return through the noise. The Tor didn't need perfection, just enough messy track for the missile to finish the close on inertial guidance. 18 kilometers. The RWR shifted from search to lock. Continuous wave illumination, fire control quality. The Tor had him. He broke hard left at about 7 Gs, chaff and flares punching out as he tried to concentrate whatever energy he could onto the last detected channel. The G-load crushed him into the seat and bled altitude fast, 22,000 feet collapsing to 16,000, then lower as the defensive brake drove the flight path earthward. Then the lock snapped. The Tor lost him in the chaff cloud. He was alive, around 14,000 feet, over a military-industrial complex where IRGC ground security carried Missile-2 shoulder-fired missiles. Missile-2's dual-band seeker checks 2 infrared wavelengths before it commits, and that makes flares a weaker argument than pilots want to believe. His real defense was altitude. Stay above the 3.5-kilometer ceiling and the missile can't reach. The Tor had dragged him roughly 2,000 feet below that line. He didn't attempt a second pass. Afterburner, climbing hard back through the man-pad ceiling, betting that an operator who just lost lock needs seconds to reacquire, and seconds were all he needed. At 20,000 feet, he rolled inverted, pulled the nose back toward Parchin, and released the GBU-31 in a diving drop that kept him above 15,000 at separation, outside the Missile-2 envelope, while skirting the ragged edge of the Tor's optimal zone. Then the bay doors opened. 8 seconds. 8 seconds where the F-35I's radar cross-section jumped from marble to basketball, long enough for any set of eyes already aimed in the right direction to snap onto the return, like flicking a light in a black room and hoping nobody saw it. Inside the Tor, the operator was still slewing through the chaff when his scope bloomed with a return that hadn't existed 2 seconds earlier, massive and clean. He slapped Track Initiate and fed the system the freshest data it had seen all night. But to build a firing quality solution at this range, he needed about 4 seconds of continuous track. He got 3, 2. Then the return collapsed as the doors slammed shut, leaving the Tor's computers chasing a 4-second-old address. But the bomb was already committed, and it wasn't aimed at the mixing hall Israel hit 9 months earlier. That earlier strike destroyed Parchin's planetary mixers, the machines that blend ingredients into solid rocket propellant. Intelligence estimated 18 months to replace them. Iran did it in 5, because mixers can be sourced through intermediaries and put back online quickly. So the missiles now arcing toward Israeli cities were still being built with propellant from machines Israel had already destroyed once. This time, the target shifted. Building 12 wasn't a mixing hall, it was a casting facility. From 40 kilometers out, the Adirs electro-optical system confirmed it. Building 12 radiated roughly 60 degrees Celsius through its roof, the signature of propellant curing inside a casting pit. You can truck in a new mixer. You can't truck in a new casting pit. And under coalition air supremacy, with satellites catching fresh pores fast, you can't rebuild one easily either. The GBU-31 punched through Building 12's reinforced roof at terminal velocity. 2,000 pounds of BLU-109 penetrator detonated inside the casting hall. The blast crushed mandrels, shattered a half-cured Khaibar Shikari first-stage motor in its cradle, and collapsed the concrete pit inward. Months of engineering erased in seconds. About 90 seconds later, the follow-on package swept in from Iraqi airspace. Spice 1000 bombs separated on roughly 100-kilometer glide trajectories, electro-optical seekers steering through smoke toward the mixing halls and storage buildings the Adirs had mapped. The strike walked across Parchin in sequence, casting first, mixing second, cruise missile R&D last. A warhead explosives facility sat 40 meters from the casting buildings, packed with RDX and HMX, and it was hit last. As the Parchin formation turned west for the tanker track over Iraq, the trailing Adirs EW suite caught something that stopped the weapons officer cold. VHF band radar energy. Iran's Gadir phased array early warning radar had been transmitting since before the first bomb hit. VHF doesn't guide missiles. It sees what fire control radars can't see cleanly, then tells everyone else where to look. Bearing, altitude band, formation size, relayed across surviving communications. Because 1,200 kilometers northeast, a second strike package was already deep inside Iran, roughly 40 minutes past the border, committed on fuel, unable to turn back, heading for the factory that produced most of the missiles hitting Israeli cities. Iran knew something was in the air tonight. The question was whether they knew where it was going. The Shared package, 4 Adirs from the 116th Lions of the South, leading 8 Rams loaded with Spice 2000, had crossed the border 90 minutes earlier on a heading no Israeli formation had ever flown. Northeast past Tehran, through the Alborz foothills, into the high desert of Semnan province. Beyond Tehran, air defenses had barely been touched by earlier SEAD, which meant the formation was flying into gaps nobody had mapped. Shared sat 1,700 kilometers from the nearest Israeli airfield. After the last refuel over Iraq, the Rams' fuel margins were in single digits. Every minute off route subtracted directly from the budget for getting home. If they burned 5 extra minutes maneuvering, the return math stopped working. Then those gaps started transmitting. The lead Adirs EW suite caught it at 200 kilometers, 3 seconds of S-band phased array energy, then silence. Another pulse arrived, and the weapons officer classified it. SA-65, Iran's domestically built mobile SAM, the replacement for S-300s destroyed during the summer 2025 campaign. Mounted on an 8x8 chassis, built to move, built to be hard to suppress, and built to survive by staying dark between flashes. 3 seconds wasn't enough for a harm to lock. It needs continuous radiation to ride the beam. The SA-65 crews had learned the counter. Pulse for 3 seconds, drive about 200 meters in the dark, pulse again from a new position. A harm arrives later at coordinates where a truck used to be. Inside the SA-65, those 3 seconds were everything. The commander called the bearing, contacts west, formation strength, then killed the array and moved. Stop, pulse, blackout, move again, repeat. There was no clean way to harm the battery, and no clean way to ignore it either, because the SA-65 snapshot did what the Tor at Parchin never managed. It found the rams. An F-35's tiny cross-section gave the SA-65 little, but a strike jet hauling external bombs, tanks, and pylons painted far louder. One snapshot at 100 kilometers gave the commander a clean track on the strike aircraft. If he went continuous and fired, 8 25G missiles could be in the air before the rams could fully react. The formation pressed through anyway. Detouring around the 150-kilometer envelope would burn about 20 minutes they didn't have. The tankers were 1,000 kilometers behind, and every drop between here and Shared was already in the tanks. The flight lead accepted the SA-65 as a calculated risk because the alternative was turning home with full racks and leaving the factory alive. Then the DAS flagged a second threat that made the SA-65 feel like a warm-up. Thermal signature at 60 kilometers east, bearing west on an intercept heading. No radar emission, no IFF. Classified in seconds, MiG-29. Launched from Shahid Hashemi Nejad Air Base at Mashhad, 400 kilometers east of Shared, a major eastern base untouched because nobody had flown this deep into Iran until tonight. Inside the MiG, the Iranian pilot hunted with IRST and kept radar cold. 5 days of war had taught surviving pilots one rule: emit and you cease to exist. His OLS-29 sensor swept steady arcs across the western sky, searching for engine heat against cold darkness. He didn't need to find stealth fighters perfectly. He needed one of them to crack a bay, descend hot, or give him a thermal bloom to point R-73 infrared missiles. Ground control had already given him a bearing off the SA-65 snapshot. He was closing from the east, between the strike formation and the tanker orbit, between the rams and home. The Adirs flight lead watched the MiG's thermal track on DAS and weighed a bad equation. One radar pulse and the MiG disappears, but one radar pulse also risks feeding the corridor a clearer picture. The MiG could threaten one aircraft inside 20 kilometers. An SA-65 with fresh cueing could threaten the entire strike package from far beyond that. He chose silence. Invisible was worth more than one hit. The Adirs spread to interpose between the MiG's approach vector and the rams, presenting frontal aspect and keeping exhaust masked. The Iranian pilot swept his sensor and found nothing at all. 4 stealth fighters tracked every twitch he made without transmitting. At 80 kilometers, the lead Adirs EOTS resolved Shared, and the weapons officer saw the problem. New buildings behind new blast walls, thermal signatures across more structures than the mission plan expected. Iran hadn't just rebuilt, it had expanded. More targets than bombs, and every unfired bomb meant a casting pit surviving to produce missiles tomorrow. The call came fast, casting only. Every weapon steered toward buildings glowing at curing temperature. Mixers could wait. These couldn't. In the rams, weapons officers rebuilt aim points in real time. New GPS coordinates, seeker reference images swapped from pre-mission data to EOTS snapshots fed through the network. 4 minutes to release, closure at 8 miles a minute. Every keystroke was triage. This pit or that one, This thermal signature, or the hotter one 200 meters south. A MiG hunting behind them. An SA-65 pulsing in the corridor. Fuel margins that allowed nothing except execution. Spice 2000 separated. 2,000-pound glide weapons with GPS and scene-matching electro-optical seekers, comparing what they see on the way down to stored imagery and steering to match. The Rams banked west immediately toward the tanker track and home. The seekers locked onto rooftops at Sherrod, correcting glide paths in the final seconds. Casting infrastructure collapsed inward under its own roofs. The heavy concrete work that took months to build folded into rubble in under 30 seconds. When satellites passed overhead later, nearly every building in the solid motor production lines was cratered. Iran's ballistic missile assembly line didn't just stop, it ceased to exist.